Okay, looks like the participation is leveling out. Um, Thanks again for joining us, everyone. We're really pleased to be here tonight and to share some important information with you about the college planning process with your seniors. I'd like to start tonight by introducing our panel here. I've listed the guidance staff here. There's 8 of us, and I've asterisked those that are presenting tonight. So I'll start with the presenters if you just want to raise your hand and say hello. We have Kate Ryder here to present tonight. We have Leanne Soulard, Julie Horner, and not presenting, but a warm welcome to Joanna Kaplan. Joanna is the newest member of our guidance department. For those of you who perhaps worked with Miss Gardner over the past few years, she is no longer here, as you already know, but Miss Kaplan has taken her place, and we are thrilled to have her. She has jumped right in. She's doing an excellent job, and I know that your students are in really good hands with her. She comes from Brookline High. She's here to just observe tonight and hear about the presentation, but certainly is well versed to answer any questions that you have of her. As far as logistics, I just want to make note that tonight's presentation is being recorded, as mentioned in the emails. So if you have neighbors, friends who weren't able to attend, we will be posting this to the website probably by Monday at any rate, so they'll be able to view the recording. The presentation itself was emailed this afternoon, but if you haven't had a chance to check that email, you'll have the full presentation in your email. We will not be opening it up tonight to question and answers, but we do have a form at the end of the presentation, and we'd welcome any questions that you have after tonight's conversation so that we can answer those. And we will go through those and post to our website and email out the answers to any questions you might have. As far as the agenda, we're going to talk just a few minutes about the college admission trends and really the landscape and how that's changed since COVID. I don't want to focus too much on COVID. That's behind us, hopefully, but we certainly have seen some impacts of COVID on the college admission process and the application process. We're going to then jump into the actual process and talk about the nuts and bolts of applying and talk through deadlines and what they mean. We'll then segue over to different roles and responsibilities. Who's in charge of what? What is the student's responsibility? What is a parent responsibility? And of course, what is the guidance counselor's responsibility? And we also will have some resources, links to resources that will be helpful for you throughout the process. And then we're going to talk about the benefits of a 2-year college and technical schools, as well as a little bit about athletics and NCAA eligibility, and then a little bit about financial aid. So post-COVID, like I mentioned before, we have seen some significant shifts in the landscape of the admissions process and what colleges are receiving as far as applications and who they're admitting. So I won't go through this in entirety, but these are some trends that we have picked up on and colleges have reported. We've all had an opportunity to sit through a number of webinars over the past year, most recently just last week from the flagship state universities, UMass Amherst, UNH, URI, and UVM. And really what colleges are seeing is a record number of applicants to their institutions. There's been a 17% increase in the most highly selective schools. They're seeing an increase there. Boston University and Tufts saw an increase of, I believe it was 50% last year. Again, record-breaking number of applications, which means the competitiveness of these schools was obviously increasing. UMass Amherst, our own flagship university, last year, so for this year's freshman class at college, saw an increase of saw a total of 42,400 applications. Again, record-breaking numbers. That's not to scare you, it's just to put things in perspective and really define kind of our work with students and how important it is to have those open lines of communication so that we're able to guide them and make sure that their list is realistic, as well as having conversations with them about adding schools or whatnot. So again, this is just kind of a trend that we have seen. The other big trend, and I think Julie will talk about it if I'm not mistaken, someone will, is the fact that no longer are standardized tests being used in most cases for admission purposes. That was a direct outcome of COVID and students not having access to the tests, and colleges finding that it really was secondary to their process. They tested the waters a little bit right out of COVID, and since then have found that really the transcript, the essay, the letters of recommendation are allowing them to admit a very good class representative of what they need. So really much less emphasis on the SATs or ACTs. In fact, you will hear terms such as test optional or test blind, which we will get into a little bit later on. But I wanted to draw your attention to that because that is kind of the lingo nowadays around the SATs. And then finally, colleges are finding they're able to do more recruitment for minority students, transfer students, and first generation students. They're finding if you ask a university what their population is made up of, there are many more of those population of students. We're going to talk about early action and early decision more in length, but I wanted to draw your attention to the popularity of those two decision deadlines. Recently, Julie Horner was sitting in on a webinar, and BU in Northeastern admitted 50% of their class early decision. And so again, I don't say that to scare you. I think that it really serves reason to have conversations with students and conversations and questions of the colleges that you're applying to, because early decision is really not for most students. But you will hear that many institutions are accepting a very high number of students that way. But we'll talk about why it is and why it isn't the right decision for your student later on this evening. The essay has become, but continues to be the most important soft factor. And that's why we emphasize it so much here at school. We have students start it in their English class during their junior year to get them thinking about appropriate topics. And they continue that effort in their senior year, where their senior English teachers are doing a variety of things around peer feedback and teacher feedback. And it is also, as you may notice at home, we notice here, the most difficult part of the process. It's very difficult for students to jump in and write something of a personal nature. But that really is probably the one component that will set a student aside from others, and therefore the most important reason why we really need to spend a lot of time on it. The other term you may hear is a term called demonstrated interest, or DI. Again, during COVID, where students weren't able to visit campuses, colleges were tracking and continue to track their demonstrated interest. So have they visited a campus? Have they requested information? Have they emailed an admission counselor? Have they attended college visits here at Franklin High School when the reps come in? So that is something that colleges continue to do, is to track the interest the students are making for that school. And then this hasn't changed, but I always like to put a plug out there for the social media component, and really talking to your students about their social media platforms, and making sure their privacy settings are set appropriately, making sure that their emails are appropriate and not ones perhaps that they made in middle school or elementary school. Colleges have been known to just Google anyone's name and really see what's out there. So that's a plug just for you parents to really have that conversation with your sons and daughters to make sure that everything is in line and check, so that there's nothing out there that they would not want a college admissions officer to see. There are so many other trends, and the term the admissions game has been around for a long time, but I do feel strongly that we're a couple years under the COVID kind of impact. And I do believe strongly that these SATs will continue to be test optional in most cases, not all, but I do think some of the trends that we're seeing are trends perhaps that will continue over the next few years, if not indefinitely. So that's really what I have to say about the trends. There's a lot more in literature out there about that, but I do want to turn it over to Julie Horner, who's going to walk us through the application process. So Julie, you're up.
Okay, thank you, Heather. So like Heather said, I'm going to go through the application process, and you can really use these next couple of slides as a checklist for you and your student. These are the things that we go over with students in our meetings with them. Something to keep in mind is that every student is at a different spot when it comes to this process. So some students might be almost done with the things I'm going to go over, and other students are just starting them, and both are perfectly fine. We're going to meet students wherever they're at, and we're going to work with them wherever they're at. So one of the first things your student's going to be thinking about is finalizing their college list. So deciding what schools they want to apply to. So when they met with their counselor in the springtime, they came away with a list of preliminary schools that they could begin to research. And hopefully over the past couple of months, they've gotten to do some research, get out and visit some campuses, and start to think about what kind of school they're looking for. What's a good fit for them? Are they comfortable being close to home? Do they want to be farther away? Do they want to be at a smaller school, smaller campus, smaller class sizes, or are they looking for a larger university, more research opportunities, those kinds of things? As they're narrowing down their list, there's no right number of schools that a student should apply to. I'd say on average, 6 to 10 schools is typically what we see. But what really is most important is that they have schools that they could see themselves attending, and those schools are appropriate for them. So a good mixture of safety and target schools. So a safety school is going to be a school that the student, their GPA is above the averages for that school. We're really confident that they will get accepted. A target school would be like they're right at the averages. We think they have a strong chance. And then a reach school would be a school where they're below the average GPA, or it's just a very competitive school, kind of unpredictable, and we think it'll be more difficult to get into. So really want to make sure students can see themselves at every school, and especially their safety schools, because oftentimes we talk with students and we're like, well, do you like these safety schools? And they're like, oh, no, I would never go there. So that doesn't make it a good safety school. Another thing to think about is having a financial safety school. So a school on there that is more affordable and an affordable option. Once they make their list, they're going to think about what deadlines they want to apply for. And as Heather was talking about, like this can be, there's some strategy that comes to the different deadline types. So the first one I'm going to talk about is early decision. So this is a deadline that is typically November 1st. And this is for students who are 100% sure that there's a college that they want to be going to, because early decision is a binding contract. So if a student applies early decision and they are accepted to that school, they are committing to attend that school. So the teacher, the counselor, the parents, the student all sign an agreement that that is the student's plan. The only way out of an early decision agreement is if the financial aid package the school offers does not work for the family. With that being said, a student should only apply early decision if the family is comfortable that they can afford the school. There are resources out there that helps a family estimate how much aid they would receive from a school. Net price calculators are required for every school to have. So if you Googled Northeastern net price calculator, that will pop up. You can enter your information into there, and it's going to give you a fairly accurate estimate of how much aid your family would be receiving. So again, every school is required to have that. So if a family is considering doing early decision, they should really be using that tool and having a good idea of how much it's going to cost them. So that would be the only way out of that agreement. But at that point, when a student, if they are accepted to an early decision school, they would have withdrawn all of their other applications once they got accepted. So it really, their options at that point would be limited. So really, again, it's a serious decision, and it's not for many students. It's really for students who are 100% sure they can afford a school and really want to go there. Early action is not binding. So students apply early, again, November 1st, November 15th. They find out earlier. So typically right around winter break, right before, right after winter break, but it is not binding. They are not committing to attend a school. Early action is really for students who are happy with their transcript and where they're at in their application at this point in time. So their transcript is only going to show through the end of their junior year. And that is because our first quarter does not end until November 10th. So for those November 1st deadlines, their transcript would not have their quarter one grades on it. So these students are happy with their GPA, the courses they took through the end of their junior year, and they feel that they are competitive applicants for the schools at this point in time. So typically, Safety or target schools would really be schools you'd be thinking about early action in most instances. Some programs do require students to apply early action, usually more competitive programs like nursing. So that is something to be aware of. Regular decision is a little bit later in the year, so January 1st, February. This is for students who need a little more time to get their applications done, or again, for students who want their quarter one grades to definitely be included in their application. Maybe your student struggled a little bit last year. They want to show how they're doing this year. Maybe they are taking the most competitive schedule that they've taken. Maybe they added an AP course this year, or they added some more honors courses, and they want to show colleges how they're doing. That regular decision is a great option for that. So, you know, typically if a school is more of a reach school, might be more difficult for your student to get into, they might be thinking regular decision is a good idea for them. Rolling admissions is when schools will review applications as they come in. So there's no set deadline. They will just review them as they receive them. Typically, they will get back to the student within 3 or 4 weeks after they submit. So your student has their list of schools, they have an idea of when they want to apply, and they want to make sure now that their applications are complete. So the main application your students are likely going to be using is the Common Application. So like the name says, it's an application that is accepted by hundreds of colleges and universities. It's very convenient. There is a main section that students fill out that they will send to any school that accepts the Common App. So it saves them time. If a school isn't on the Common App, they're going to have their own individual school application that the student would fill out on the school's website. Ask similar questions, just a different application. In addition to the main sections that the student fills out on the Common App that goes to every school, each school is going to have a couple of their own specific questions. So as Heather was talking about earlier, now that schools are test optional, all other pieces of the application weigh more heavily, right? So if a school has an optional question that they're asking students to answer, we tell students, like, that's not optional, it's required. They should be doing that. It's really important that they are answering any questions the school asks. It's really important that they're putting thought into their answers. If the question is asking, why do you want to come to our school? They should be researching the school, putting specific information into those answers. In addition to that, some schools also require something called the SSAR, so the Self-Reported Student Academic Record. And this is basically, they want students to self-report their transcripts. So they're going to report the grades that they earned in their classes. There is a link in this PowerPoint. The first link next to the SSAR will take you to the website where students have to complete it. And then the required here link will tell you what schools require it. So some popular schools for our students that require the SSAR are like University of Delaware, UConn, Rutgers, Penn State. The SSAR does have to be submitted by the deadline. So it's important that students are completing those, making sure they're getting them done on time. So another part of the essay, another part of the application is the essay, like Heather talked about. It is an important piece. Again, without testing, more weight is put on the other factors of the application, and one of those is the essay. So students are working on those. Feedback we've gotten from admissions is that they want to know what is motivating a student. How do they work well with others? What do they do when things get tough? What do they think about? What are they curious about? So these are the kinds of things they want to find out about your student through their essay. They're really wondering what kind of student is going to be coming to our campus. So it is a good opportunity to share more about themselves that can't be seen from other parts of their application. It's important for students to make sure it's a good piece of writing. It should be edited, but also it's important to make sure that it maintains the student's voice. Admissions counselors can tell when too many hands have been on an essay, so really making sure it's still clear that the student was the one writing it. Some colleges are going to require supplemental essays, so it's really important that students are checking for those and factoring kind of the time needed to complete those into their timeline of completing everything. So again, supplemental essays, very important. They need to take time on them, has to be a strong piece of writing, make sure that they're taking the time to really do those well. Once the application is done, they are going to pay a fee and submit it. So they submit each school individually. Each school typically has a fee that ranges from $50 to $100. So that kind of ties into having a thoughtful list of schools, because that certainly adds up very quickly. There are fee waivers available to students who are on free and reduced lunch. They can talk with their counselor about that. Some colleges will also offer fee waivers if a student goes on a campus tour or does an info session or goes to campus in any way. So that's something you can ask about and check about as well. So in addition to the application itself, there's some additional components that need to be submitted to make the whole application complete. So one of those things is letters of recommendation. So all colleges typically require a counselor letter, which their guidance counselor will write. And then many colleges require a teacher letter. Many require one, some will require two. So that's why we ask that students do not ask more than 2 teachers. Those letters should come from core teachers. That's typically what is required when a school asks for a teacher letter of recommendation. If a student wants to ask somebody outside of the school to write a letter, they can. Sometimes students will ask a coach or an employer or somebody else that knows them well, and they are welcome to do that. They will just want to check to make sure that their colleges accept those letters, and then they'll work with their counselor to get those letters sent out. Another thing we encourage students to do is really just remember to send thank you letters to their teachers for writing the recs. Teachers do it during their own time. They are not obligated to write letters. So just a quick thank you goes a long way. Oh, something else to remember about rec letters is students want to make sure that they let their teachers know their earliest deadline so that the teachers know when they have to have the letter uploaded by. Another piece is the transcript. So that is their academic record, the final grades they've earned in their classes. Students need to have a discussion with their counselor 5 school days in advance of their deadline. So that's really a bare minimum. They should be talking to us hopefully weeks in advance of their deadlines. So hopefully at this point, most November 1st deadline students have had a conversation with their counselor. And that's just to make sure that we have plenty of time to prepare everything and get everything out that they need. SAT and ACT scores, so like Heather talked about, schools continue to be test optional. It's up to a student whether they want to report their test scores or not. Our advice typically is that you would not report your scores unless you're above the average for a school, because then it's not really going to be adding anything to your application. If a student decides to report their scores, they're going to want to check on how the college accepts the scores. So some schools will let a student self-report their scores on their Common App, whereas others want them to send an official score report through College Board. So that link right there tells you what schools accept self-reporting, but a student should double check just to make sure. If they do have to send an official score report, that would be their responsibility. They would send that through College Board, and there is a fee associated with it. Test optional, if a student really decides not to send their scores, there's no disadvantage to them. It really is truly test optional. It's just, like we've said, one less data point. So more focus is put on the other parts of the application if there isn't a test score. Test blind would be schools that don't look at test scores at all. So test optional, they'll look at them if you send them. Test blind schools will not look at test scores at all. Some final components, sending Q1 grades. So as I talked about earlier with the different application types, for early action schools, November 1st schools, Q1 grades will not be available on the transcript yet. So our quarter ends November 10th, so our grades most likely won't be available for another week after that. With that said, we will send Q1 grades once they are available to those early action schools. And we do that really to cover our bases in case there is a school that wants to see them. So there's no guarantee that an early action school will look at them, but we send them just in case there are any schools that want them. So we send those to all early action schools. Mid-year grades, we will only send by request. So if a student applies regular decision and their college wants to see their second quarter grades, there will be a form that we send out and students will let us know if they need us to send them or not. Auditions and portfolios are important to be aware of for students who are interested in music or art or dance or theater. Every school is different in how they go about scheduling auditions and accepting portfolios. I think oftentimes we see that a student has to submit their application first before they get a link for submitting the portfolio. So I would say make sure your students are checking on that type of information. And if they need to submit their application a couple of days ahead of the deadline so that they get the link to submit their portfolio, they want to make sure that they are doing that. Interviews are not required, but sometimes are an option at schools. It's just another point of contact, another option of showing demonstrated interest, like Heather talked about. If you feel your student could do well in an interview and could portray themselves well, then that's certainly something they could take advantage of. I think a lot of interviews are still done remotely, but some schools might be doing them in person as well. And social media, I know Heather kind of drove this home, but again, schools do look up students. So just being aware of their social media presence and making sure everything is appropriate. I am going to turn it over to Kate, who is going to talk about kind of who's responsible for all the things I just talked about.
Thanks, Julie. So I'm Kate Ryder. Before I get into all my slides, I just want to touch on something that Julie had actually spoke about, just to address a really common question. One of the optional essays that we see in the Common App is about how COVID affected your student. That's the one exception to if it's optional, you should definitely do it. If COVID affected your student in a really significant way outside of, having to switch to virtual learning and things that we all kind of faced in that time, then they can write about the essay if it seems appropriate. But if their COVID experience was more typical, then that is an optional essay that they can skip. Okay, so now I'm going to jump into who is responsible for what as far as the application process. So this is a list of what your student is responsible for. One of the most important things is knowing and meeting their application deadlines. So every school is going to have multiple deadlines, most likely for early action, regular decision. And it's really important for your student to know exactly the date. Because even though there's common ones, like early action tends to be November 1st, November 15th, there are schools that vary from that. So it's really important for them to know the exact date that their applications are due by. They're also responsible for meeting with their guidance counselor. So at this point, we've met with a good portion of our senior class, but we're finding that there's definitely a little resistance when it comes to senior perk periods, which is understandable. So seniors are allowed to leave campus first period, last period, and during lunch if they have directed study. But we ask that they stay and meet with their guidance counselor if that's when their guidance counselor is able to meet with them. We all have a significant number of seniors, and we are trying to give everyone the time that they need as far as resources within the school day. So it's important that they meet with their counselor when they set that meeting. There is something called a meeting request form in the Google Classroom. That's one thing that we've asked seniors to fill out this fall. It was part of the initial process of scheduling meetings with our students, but it's also just really helpful for your student to be checking in with the guidance Google Classroom as much as they can, or at least regularly, because we do post a lot of information on there, all about the college process and just post-secondary planning in general. So your students should have access to their guidance Google Classroom, and they should be checking the posts. One issue or point of confusion we've noticed is that sometimes posts are not coming from your student's counselor because we all share the responsibility of posting to Google Classroom. So even if they see a post from another guidance counselor, they're still responsible for checking in, looking at the information, because we're posting it for all seniors, not just our caseload. Another piece that they're responsible for is requesting transcripts and naviance. Your student's guidance counselor should review this process with them. It's just a way for students to confirm which schools they're attending, checking in with their counselor, and giving them the all clear to send transcripts to those schools. because students' lists can change from meeting to meeting with counselor, and we want to all be on the same page about which schools they're definitely applying to and which schools need to have received their materials. Another piece on Naviance is the junior questionnaire. So many students completed this in the spring or summer and some earlier this fall. But this is an informal questionnaire that we ask students to put some thought into because it helps us write our letters of recommendation. We've met with your student over the years and we know them, but really mostly in the context of our one-on-one meetings. The junior questionnaire gives them an opportunity to speak more about their high school experience, and it will really strengthen our letters of recommendation for them. Another point would be registering for the college rep visits in Naviance, because we have college representatives that come to Franklin High School to meet with students. It's a really great opportunity for them to see and talk with the person who will be reading their application. So it's not a random person from the college that comes to the high school. It is the person that will be reading applications. So it's a really great opportunity for students to meet them. They can register for those visits in Naviance. We've had a handful already, but I know there's still more coming up in the upcoming weeks. And finally, students are responsible for submitting their own applications. So as counselors, we do submit materials to the colleges that they are applying to, but the application is submitted by the student through the Common App or the private application portal that they're using. In addition to the application themselves, students are also responsible for submitting their test scores. So like Julie said, these can be self-reported for some schools. Other schools require an official score report be sent through the College Board website, and the student is responsible for both of those. If they have questions about whether or not their school is self-reported or how to send an official score report through the College Board, they can definitely talk to us and we can walk them through the process. But it is something that they ultimately have to do on their end. Okay, here are some links that you will have access to if you received the presentation from Heather earlier today. It's the link for how to complete the junior questionnaire, register for those visits, some just kind of logistical things about adding schools to the Common App, requesting teachers in Naviance. And then the final link is more resources for life after high school, which actually brings you to the guidance page on the high school's website. It was recently revamped this summer and has a lot of helpful information on there. Here's a quick overview over some common deadlines. And like Julie said, the minimum amount of time we want to wait before you let your counselor know that you're applying to a school. So for example, if your student has a November 1st deadline, by October 25th, their counselor should know that they're applying to that November 1st deadline. Ideally, we do know well before that because we do need time to kind of gather materials. But this just gives you an idea of how long 5 school days can be, especially in those winter months. If you see, a January 15th deadline, we need to know by January 9th because of days off. For a January 1st deadline, we need to know by December 19th so that we're able to get those materials sent off before the winter break. Okay, and this is what us as guidance counselors are responsible for. So we are a resource for direction, support, advice, and information. We are happy to meet with their student as much as they need and walk them through the process. We field questions, we have our one-on-one meetings. We're happy to do so as far as providing information and walking through the various steps of this process as much as they need to. Like I said, we have our individual sessions with students. They will meet with us multiple times this fall just to make sure we're on the same page, everyone knows who's responsible for what and next steps. We will send our transcripts, or not our transcripts, your students' transcripts, letters of recommendation, and other supporting documents from the school, which is why it's really important that we know which schools your student is applying to. So even if you're working with a private college coach and they have done all the work as far as figuring out which colleges you're applying to and going through all the steps on your student's end, it's important for us to be involved as well so we can send those materials to your colleges. And finally, this is your role as parents. You, I'm sure, have a lot of questions and are looking for how you fit into this whole process. Emotional support is a huge thing. This is stressful for your students. I know it's stressful for you too, but if you can be that emotional support at home, it can go a really long way for your students. Having reality checks and honest conversations is also really important. This comes from the side of both admissions and financially. Like Julian mentioned, it's really important to have safety schools on your list, and it's important to be honest with your student about what those safety school options might be. So if you find that your student has all reach schools, not really a safety school, then it's good to have the conversation of, hey, where is this missing from your list? And we'll have those conversations with your student as well, but it's nice to know that parents are on the same page. Again, financially, having that safety school is important. Talking about what you guys can afford, what age you can expect, using those net price calculators together can be really helpful and keep you all informed over what's going to be a good fit for your student. Regular reminders. I know we are making really big decisions here. We're putting a lot of responsibility on the students, but they are still teenagers. So it's helpful to have regular reminders from their counselors, from their parents, just to make sure that they are checking in as needed, they're meeting their deadlines, and they're hitting all those little steps leading up to the application process. Honest communication is really important. Hopefully your student is being open and honest with you about where they're at in the process. You're also welcome to reach out to your student's counselor if you have questions or need a little bit more insight. But having those open communication conversations at home can be really helpful during this time. Finally, there's a link there for a parent brag sheet that can also be found on the guidance website. This is an opportunity for you to talk about how awesome your kid is. It is one more piece of information we can use in writing our letters of recommendation. So we encourage you to fill it out and brag about your kid. Let us know all the things that we don't see from them at school that you've always wanted to talk to people about. So you can fill that out and send it to your student's counselor, and we will be happy to incorporate your thoughts into our letter. I am going to pass it off to Leanne now, who's going to talk about options outside of the traditional four-year school.
Thank you, Kate. So I have quite a sort of bag of random items here. So I've got some notes in front of me. So if you see me looking away, I just don't want to forget anything because it's all important. So, so we've heard quite a lot about, this four-year college process. And I guess, let's just kind of be honest, about 85%, maybe even a little higher of graduates here from Franklin High School do go off to a four-year college, but there are so many options beyond a four-year college, and we want to talk about those too. So the first thing I want to say is that it's super important to recognize that the two-year college option is not a consolation prize. It's its own path. It's important, it's worthy, and in a lot of cases, it's an efficient and cost-effective way to get started in some high-demand careers. It's true, not all careers require a four-year degree. There are a lot that only require a two-year degree. Those jobs might include paralegal or a cybersecurity specialist, and don't we need way more of those than we have these days? Or even a registered nurse. A lot of people think that that's a four-year degree. There is a four-year degree, but you don't need to have a four-year degree to be a registered nurse, So at community colleges, they also offer certificate programs, and these can be a really excellent option for students who don't necessarily want to attend a four-year college after high school, but they do want and rightfully deserve a career that offers them a middle-class lifestyle and opportunities for career growth and upward mobility. Our world is changing, our economy is changing, and community colleges have been really responsive to these things that are happening in the world, and maybe even more so than four-year colleges in some way. There are a lot of opportunities outside of the traditional skilled trades that people often go for when they're talking to students that don't want to attend a four-year college, plumbing, HVAC, carpentry, those sorts of things, an electrician. But really, we have whole new economies. We have the blue and green economies that offer really good paying in-demand careers that don't require a degree. Some of these might be a wind turbine technician, solar energy positions, even water research specialists, as we talk about, climate change and the global need for people who, can be in the field doing the work. So, again, these are really excellent targeted career training for students who are eager to begin work after high school, but maybe more English, math, science, and social studies isn't their thing right now, and I think that that's the good thing about, education. It's so important to remember that it's always there for a student. People go back to school when they're middle-aged, so it's always there. It's not necessarily the only way out of high school. So if you've got one of these students that's, maybe not sure what they want to do, or they're kind of doubting if they want to go, encourage them to really dream big and look into some of these new opportunities that the world is offering. And certainly we bring them up in our meetings as well. But, always use your guidance counselor as a resource when talking about your options for after high school. The other thing that I want to say about, two-year colleges and technical training schools is that, again, it's its own path, right? So tours and information sessions are a really important part of the process of finding out the right fit for your school, no matter where you're going. And even at, these two-year and technical school options, some of the programs are really competitive. Like I know of one community college that, for students who would like to be in the culinary program, they're not even considered until they attend a special information session. At another community college, students might need to take a prerequisite course or two before they can actually go into the nursing program. So, you still need a pretty long runway, even when you're considering other options. So again, it's not less important. It doesn't necessarily require any less work on the student's part, or really the parents' part, when it comes to helping students find the right fit. So other considerations, might be that students don't want to move far away from home anymore. They're not sure, we're still coming out of this pandemic, and it was, rattling for a lot of people. And, we're finding that while some students want to get on a plane and go to California, others are, less sure about leaving home. So they might want to stay close and, start at home and then move on from there. Okay, we can go on to the next slide. Okay, so the other really obvious and good reason that students are starting at a community college is to save money, right? So we know that the cost of college is just going up and up every year, and this is a good way to reduce the costs. In Massachusetts, really in most states, but in Massachusetts, since that's where we are, our community colleges and our public universities have an agreement, an articulation agreement called the Mass Transfer A to B program, where students can start at a community college and then transfer to a four-year college of their choice after 2 years. And there are some different ways to get there. So this is a graphic that outlines all the various ways. So there's the traditional bachelor's program, which is the 4-year, option. So on average, that's going to be a little less than $50,000. And then, some students might go to community college for 1 year and then do 3 years and transfer that way. So that's, 1 year savings. And then we get into the transfer options for 2 and 2. So the mass transfer A to B degree is 2 years at a community college and then transferring to a state university or a UMass campus with about a quarter of the savings. And then when students can maintain a 3.0 GPA, the agreement from the state is that they will receive additional savings on their degrees. So they receive a tuition and fees discount. So again, you can go all in, 4 years public campus, or you can start at a community college, save some money, get all of your core requirements done. And part of the arrangement is that the courses that students take at these community colleges automatically transfer. So there's no question about whether that class is going to count or if they'll need to repeat that. When you're in the A to B path, you can be sure that all of the courses you're taking are going to transfer. I'll also say too that a lot of students start at community college and transfer to other institutions out of state or private schools. And every community college, at least here in Massachusetts, has a set of transfer advisors that will help students with that process if that's the way they choose to go. Okay, so moving on to athletics eligibility. So this is super exciting time of year. Students are not only applying to college, but some students are thinking about playing their sport in college. And the recruiting process sometimes isn't as clear to understand as it could be for parents and guardians. And especially when emotions get wrapped up in that, we tend to, kind of hear what we want to hear. So I just want to say a little bit about the recruiting process and the national letter of intent. So it's important to understand that if your student is just in conversation with a coach right now at a school about playing their sport, it doesn't necessarily translate to a guarantee of admission or spot on the team. Nothing is official until everybody signs a letter saying that this is happening. So admission is granted and, the student will be playing the sport. So just keep that in mind. I know that I've been working with students lately who are still in conversations with coaches, and it looks really good, but nothing's been signed yet. So you want to make sure that, you understand that process is a full loop. For Division 1 and 2 athletes, they need to register at the Eligibility Center, which some of you may remember as NCAA Clearinghouse. For Division 1 and 2 athletes, they need to be cleared with some core courses that colleges require at that level. So we do submit transcripts periodically through guidance. There's a way for students to request their transcript to be sent to the clearinghouse, and we take care of that for them. This is just to ensure that they meet the academic standards of these Division 1 and 2 institutions. For Division 3, students don't necessarily have to register with the Eligibility Center. They can, but they don't need to. There are no particular or specific requirements to play at the Division 3 level, but students do need to remain in good academic standing. And I think that this is known by everybody, but I'll just say it just so we're clear, any admission, whether you're an athlete or not, is conditional and contingent upon students finishing in good academic standing right through the end of senior year. Okay, financial aid, probably one of the big reasons that people are here tonight to talk about this process. It has started. So the FAFSA went live on October 1st. So we have a couple of types of financial aid. So scholarships and grants, that's the best kind of money, the kind of money that doesn't need to be paid back. And then there are loans, both subsidized and unsubsidized. And work study is also a form of financial aid, which is when a student is offered an on-campus job at a certain number of hours a week, and that's money in their pocket. So that's really nice. So those are all need-based. So not scholarships, but grants, loans, and work study are often need-based, not all the time. And there are two sort of forms that are used to get financial aid. So the first is the FAFSA. So this is the federal form, the free application for federal student aid. This went live on October 1st, and this is for need-based aid that covers, those work study, need-based loans, need-based grants, that sort of thing. It's really, they've streamlined it over the years, so it's much simpler than it was many years ago to fill it out. There's an IRS data retrieval tool that you can use to import your tax data. And the first thing you're going to want to do, if you haven't already, is to get your FSA ID. This is your electronic signature. It's a PIN that you'll get. Both parents and the student need their own PIN. So you'll do that ahead of actually filing the FAFSA. You can submit it to 10 schools. And one question that we get a lot is, well, I'm applying to 15 schools. What now? So you submit it to the first 10. And then you wait a day or two until you can confirm that schools receive that FAFSA, and then you go back in and you delete some schools, and then you add in the remainder of the schools. So that's how you work around that limit of 10. The CSS profile is another financial aid form used by about 200 or so colleges and universities. I think every single one of them is private. Many of them are here in the Northeast, so you could be finding yourself having to submit the CSS profile for a couple schools on your students list. It can only be done electronically, and you do it through the College Board. But if you put CSS profile into Google, it's going to come right up for you. The CSS profile is used by schools most commonly to distribute their private funds from their endowment. So they can use a different definition of need, or sometimes they might have a particular scholarship that they can give to, people who have certain financial, qualities, I guess, for lack of a better word. So when you have to submit the CSS profile, you want to time that for just about when you plan to submit the applications. So if students are applying early action, you want to make sure that you get that CSS profile in just about for November 1st or November 15th or whenever it is that the deadline rolls around. So again, just put CSS profile into Google. It'll come right up. You can check the list of schools that do use it. And, we certainly do encourage you to use it. Even if you think that you don't qualify for aid, the CSS profile uses a different methodology and schools can define need differently according to what kind of money they have in the bank. So it's always worth your while to do that. Over on the right side of the screen, we have, some other scholarship options. So the Adams and the Koplik, those are based on MCAS scores. We don't have the names of students who are eligible for those yet, but we will shortly, and we'll notify students as they're ready. We have local scholarships that come out in a packet in the February-March timeline, and we also keep a running list of scholarships on Naviance. So definitely students should be checking that kind of often. Right now, there's not a ton on there, but they really start to roll in, kind of as October comes and definitely November. So there are a lot of options. So once the college applications are in, students tend to think that the job is done, but that's actually when the scholarship work is starting. So just so you can get them going on Naviance and applying for money. MIFA is a really excellent resource. So this is the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority, and they're sort of, the authority on financial aid here in Massachusetts. They used to do a lot of in-person events, but since the pandemic, as you can imagine, they've gone virtual, sort of like we have, because it's more convenient for people. More people can join from their kitchen. And if you can't be here tonight, you can play the recording. So they have a bunch of on-demand webinars that are there. So there's, financial aid applications, eligibility factors, how our college is determining aid, how to break down a financial aid offer, how to compare them so that you're looking, apples to apples type of thing. And then this is just a helpful link page. So there's the FAFSA link. So beware, there are some other FAFSA websites out there. The FAFSA that you want to use is a .ed.gov. So FAFSA.gov. FAFSA.com also exists, and they will charge you, I don't know, something like $75 to file the free application for federal student aid. So you don't want to pay an application fee for free money. So if you get there, go back, FAFSA.gov. The CSS profile is there. That's the link for that. FinAid is another good resource, sort of similar to MIFA, I guess. They have a lot of how-tos and break down financial aid offers, that sort of thing. FastWeb is a great scholarship search engine. It's vetted. There are no scams on there. It's very reputable, and I recommend it all the time for students. I'm sure we all do. MIFA.org, we've already talked about that. And then I don't have a link for the net price calculators, but again, we really can't understate using these net price calculators that are found on every school's website, just to kind of wrap up that early decision. The data can be scary, like I must need to apply early decision to get in, right? But honestly, there's really no good reason these days. I'll be just really honest. There's no good reason to be backing out of an early decision agreement, because you can use a net price calculator ahead of time and find out within a couple of $1,000s what you're going to be responsible for paying. So definitely use them, because they can be really, really valuable, and they can even help you kind of hone the list down before the applications even go in if you find that something's just really not reasonable for your family to afford. So okay, one more slide. Again, these are just resources that we've already talked about. So Common App, this is where your students are doing a lot of work right now, probably. College Board, this is where they send their test scores from. If they took the ACT and they want to send their ACT scores, they can send them right from their ACT account. You've got the Eligibility Center website there. It always weirds me out when I log on to this website because it looks fake, because it's not a .com or anything like that, but that's the link. They have the guide for students, but if you're a student talking to coaches, you're probably well past that point. And then there's more information there on the National Letter of Intent for you. So we go next slide.
Thanks, Leanne. What I failed to remember is that we had embedded a lot of links in this presentation. So my apologies to the parents, guardians attending tonight. What I sent you was a PDF version of the PowerPoint. So I will get that out on our website. I also will email it out, I think, to everyone. So you have the links accessible to you. So I will do that tomorrow or Monday at the very latest. So my apologies for that. I think just to wrap up, I want everyone to really know that your students are in really good hands here. Collectively, we have lots and lots of years of experience. One request I do have in meeting with the students with whom I work is that regardless of who's doing this process for them, whether it be an outside college counselor, whether it be a parent or guardian, students really need to be part of the process. I think that goes without saying, but I need students to know their passwords for certain platforms. So when your students are coming to meet with us a final time or to process information, it is critically important that they know their password to Naviance, to the Common App. There are certain things that go into syncing information, and it will save you a headache because they will be texting you frantically if you have those passwords. Or perhaps they have to get in touch with their private college counselor and that doesn't happen for a few days. And then our meeting is certainly not as productive as it can be. So if, as you're talking through the presentation tonight and you're able to debrief, please share those passwords with your student. It's critically important that they have those. And that helps us have productive, meaningful appointments with them as we process information. I can't emphasize enough the importance of having your students check Google Classroom. As Kate mentioned, we're distributing information very regularly, and she was very eloquent in stating that it may not come from their guidance counselor, but it is information that is for all seniors. So maybe make that a routine once a week to check the Google Classroom as well. Like I mentioned, right here on this last slide, there is a link, which you will have tomorrow, to a form where we will ask and invite you to ask, any questions that we may not have covered, or you need perhaps some clarification. We as a team will go through these early next week and post any answers to our website. If that still doesn't answer, or you have specific questions as it relates to your own child, please reach out at any time. This is a priority for us over the next couple of months, and we want to be as helpful as we can, but we don't know what you're experiencing or what your child is experiencing at home unless there's that open lines of communication. So please don't hesitate to reach out with anything. And again, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we look forward to working with you in the coming months. Take care.